Hello everyone, it's me, Garrett of Oz, back a lot faster than I expected to be with my video for the Patchwork Girl of Oz. Gotta say, I couldn't put it down. That's why we're here so fast. I just could not stop myself. Okay, so, first things first, I hope everyone's doing well. Patchwork Girl, as we discussed in the last video, was Baum's first return to the world of Oz after effectively trying to end the series with Emerald City of Oz. Which, as you probably remember, at the conclusion of that book, Glinda cuts Oz off from the rest of the known world. And there was going to be no more communication. Well, as we also know, Baum ran into some money trouble. Baum also didn't have as much luck with other series as he had hoped, and so he returned to his cash cow, the Oz books. Now, that's not to say that this is a bad book, a trite book, or really anything to that effect, because it's really a fantastic book. With the 3 years between Emerald City and Patchwork Girl, it was enough of a break that Baum hits the ground running nice and refreshed. And he explains in the prologue, or in the introduction, excuse me, that he received so many letters, and someone suggested that why couldn't Dorothy use a wireless telegraph to telegraph the stories to Mr. Baum and back. And of course, because Glinda has the book, her big book that lets her see everything that's going on, Glinda knew what was about to happen, so Glinda arranged for this to take place, and the Shaggy Man conveniently knows how to send and receive and understand Morse code. So there you go. That's how we get our Oz stories now, is by telegraph. Patchwork Girl introduces four characters that stick around for the rest of the series. Two of them fairly prominently, one less so but still prominently. Those being the titular character, the Patchwork Girl, Scraps, Bungle, the Glass Cat, Ojo, the Munchkin, and the Woozy. I love the Woozy. I really just love this book in general. Okay, so the basic premise of the book is Ojo and his uncle go to visit the crooked magician, who we heard about in the Land of Oz. And through a slight series of misfortunes, the Patchwork Girl is brought to life, but at the same time, the crooked magician's wife and Ojo's uncle are turned to stone. And for him to be saved, the crooked magician can remake the Powder of Life, but it will take 6 years of constantly stirring 4 kettles with one with each arm and one with each leg. Or he can go on a quest and find a specific set of items. 3 hairs from the tail of a woozy, a gill of water from a dark well, a 6-leaf clover, the left wing of a yellow butterfly, and I think that was it. There may have been something else. Oh, and a drop of oil from a live man's veins, which is always the one that's the most confused. That one always escapes me. 5 things. So, Ojo, Scraps, and Bungle set off to try and save their friends. And we get the traditional quest story. There's lots of fun, crazy, weird encounters, and we find out what jail in Oz is like, and that clear utopian process there. Dorothy joins in on the fun at one point, and it's a really solid quest book. That is not to say they're not its problems, which we'll discuss those in a moment or two. So we get a very, very interesting structure with this. There's a lot of people who parallel it to Wizard and say, oh, well, he was just rehashing it. And in a sense, you've got a little bit of that structure where you start in Munchkin Land, They do end up following the Yellow Brick Road, because as we know, there are multiple yellow bricks. You have sort of this weird band of made-up characters of one person who's made out of cloth materials. You've got sort of a weird beast creature. You've got a glass creature, so you've got a man-made object made of a totally different material than just fabric. You've got a boy. Later you do have Dorothy. And Toto. So you have this sort of similar grouping of characters. Not enough to the extent that I feel like they're a rehash. But you also have the story structure. You start in Munchkinland, Yellow Brick Road, to Emerald City. Emerald City is kind of the halfway point of the book. Then they go back out on a journey, return to Emerald City, sudden denouement, thanks to Glinda and the Wizard. So you do get some parallels. They go down into the south, they go into the west. They don't venture into Gilligan country in this book, very much like the original. But for me, I feel like that's not really the case. Whereas this was one of Baum's more prolific years. He did write 5 books. There aren't really and the characters can be sort of stocky. The situations can be sort of stocky. But with Wizard, the quest was always get home. See the Wizard, then you get a second quest, then back to Wizard, third quest to Glinda, overall quest finally fulfilled. Whereas in this, it is the same quest the entire way through. So to me, I can see the comparisons, but personally, I don't view this as a rehash of Wizard. I don't really feel like it's a strong rehash. And the characters themselves are much livelier. For one, you have the always delightful Patchwork Girl. And there she is. The Patchwork Girl, I very easily could see in a 1960s or 70s TV adaptation of the book being done by either Ruth Buzzy or Joanne Worley. Because she's got that sort of wide-eyed, hackneyed, quirky humor, and indignance about her. In fact, one of my absolute favorite pictures comes from scraps. And it's the I hate dignity. Because she does. Or, as she says, I hate dignity. Half the fools are and all the wise folks are dignified, and I'm neither the one nor the other. She sings frequently, much like I do. Really, I kind of identify with Scraps from a personal standpoint. But it's a very broadly comic character. Of course, and she and the Scarecrow fall for each other, and it's a continuous round of compliments. And then you've got Bungle the Glass Cat, who I did not enjoy terribly well. I didn't actively dislike her, but very quickly, she's a glass cat. She's not terribly nice because she has a ruby red heart, so her heart is basically stone. She has green emerald eyes, which the illustrations don't really capture, and that's probably for the best, simply because I think it would probably be a little terrifying, and here she is. And she has little pink brains that she thinks are the greatest things ever, and she continually says, I have brains, you can see them work, and I have this sort of Estelle Getty sort of voice to her. Normally, I know I don't really ascribe voices to it, but they're so strong in this. And that's one of the things with this book specifically, is the characters are all very strongly written. And then you've got the Woozy. And the Woozy is probably one of my absolute favorite characters. Let's see. I know I've got a picture of him. Here's our friend, the Woozy, who when he gets angry shoots sparks that can light things on fire, and he has a growl that is supposedly terrible, but really and truly isn't. Isn't that adorable? Don't you just want a Woozy of your own? Well, the good news is, and I need to make a copy of it before I do, but if you travel back to 1913, this is not one from 1913, this is a reproduction, you could get a little cutout Woozy that rocks. Isn't that cute? Totally gonna cut him out, and he's gonna go up there. Now I'm gonna have a Woozy. And that's kind of, those are the big new characters, if you will. There's also a lot of little side characters, and there's one, there are two in particular that are somewhat problematic. The first one is a phonograph that accidentally gets brought to life, and nobody can stand. And he comes in about 3 different times and plays different songs. He plays a symphony, he plays a ragtime, and he plays a minstrel song. The minstrel songs are completely not okay in the modern world. And really and truly, they weren't okay then. I mean, they weren't. The whole concept of vaudeville, with Step and Fetch It, the minstrel shows, the blackface, that's not okay. However, the book is a product of its time, and those songs were popular. So it would be the equivalent today, obviously not quite to this, but it would be the equivalent of the phonograph playing a classical piece, playing a Kanye West song, and then also playing a Katy Perry song. I mean, it's that sort of, that's what's going on. And well, no, I don't want to classify Kanye West in minstrel, because that's certainly not the case. It's the closest comparison we've got. So it's problematic for a modern reader, but it would not have been seen even remotely problematic in 1913. And that's one thing I feel like you really have to bear in mind when reading these books. Granted, this is kind of the end of that. Is you have to look first at authorial intent, and there is no ill intent at all in these. And then you have to look at the time frame and what was deemed acceptable. And it's one thing, this is a little tangential, it's one thing that I really wish Disney would sort of figure out, is Song of the South is not an accurate portrayal of Southern life, of African-American Southern life, particularly at that time frame. But if you look at it through that lens, and you look at it from that perspective of, well, this is what they did, and now here we are 80, 90, 100 years down the road going, yeah, this is not okay, and this is why it's not okay. That's what I feel is important here. Which leads me to my next group that's problematic, and that is the characters of the Tottenhots. Authorial intent-wise, I think very much like the Growlywogs in Emerald City of Oz, Baum was thinking, funny word, twist on it. From Hottentot to Tottenhot. The characters themselves are meant to seem like savages, but they're very fun and nice and friendly and relatively smart, so they're articulate savages. That's what's the twist is. Which to a degree is very modern, because you could look at that and say, well, maybe Baum's intent here is to say, well, they aren't these people they aren't buffoons, they aren't savages, they aren't monsters, they're very nice, smart, intelligent human beings. That may not be the case, that's how I'm kind of choosing to look at it. But again, and he describes them as having dusky skin, so it's no slight that they probably are meant to be African in that sense, but they also have red, yellow, green hair, and they live in upside-down kettles. So, where I think things get truly problematic, and I apologize for this, comes with Neil's illustrations of the savages with the ear piercings, looking very much like Desi Arnaz in the episode of I Love Lucy where Lucy gives birth. it's awful. I mean, really and truly, his artwork makes it significantly worse, to the same extent that I think the Growly Wogs in Emerald City of Oz are made a million times worse by his illustration of them as Native Americans. So, Authorial Intent, I don't believe racism was intended, and even with Illustrator's intent, I don't think he meant anything malicious. The illustrations are not okay at all, and that's, I think, it's a very interesting problem that is created. Again, like I said, I don't feel authorially that Baum was meaning anything malicious or with bad intent, but it's there, and that's my take on it. If you disagree, please feel free to say so. I am more than willing to discuss, because if you interpret it differently, that's totally valid. That's just my interpretation. So you have the new characters, you've got the adventure, they go above ground, they go underground. There's a trick river, probably the very same river that Dorothy and company encountered in Wizard, based on its fast current. And the fact that they're coming out of Quadling Country into the Land of the West, it's probably the same river. They get most of the items, except, of course, for the butterfly, the wing from the yellow butterfly. We're jogging back a little to the story at this point. So, the Woozy comes along and agrees to give Ojo the hairs from his tail. In the land of the Quadlings, after they settle a dispute between the Hoppers and the Horners, they are able to get their water from the well. The Tin Woodman provides the oil from his joints. That's 3. The 6-leaf clover is a little trickier, because it's illegal to pick them, but Ojo, in his haste, sees one and decides to do so, and is thrown in jail. Now, jail in Oz is very different than jail anywhere else. In Oz, first you get a sheet thrown over you, so you look like a Halloween ghost, and you're marched through town to the prison. The prison is manned by a very nice lady who fixes you a gourmet meal. You're treated very well. They tell you stories, they play games with you, because Ozma's belief is that if things were bad enough for you to break the law, you probably feel so guilty that there is no reason for Ozma to punish you further in that sense, to make jail so miserable, because clearly you're miserable already. And of course then that makes makes Ojo feel bad about what he's done, and feel worse about what he's done. And so in a way, it works. Now, again, Oz is Utopia. Don't think that would work here. But it's a very interesting concept. Ozma does forgive him and explains that the reason 6-leaf clovers are illegal to be picked is because they're used in so many magic spells, and Ozma has outlawed all sorcery and magic being practiced by anyone other than herself, Glinda, and the wizard. And I'm assuming Dorothy, if in need, had the magic belt, she would be allowed to use it. So when the Tin Man refuses, obviously, to not let them hurt a butterfly by removing one of its wings, Ojo is crushed. And so they return to Emerald City to see if maybe there's something Ozma can do. And everything wraps up all nice and neat in one chapter. Literally one chapter. We go, a good, what is it, 200 or so pages? Oh, no, more than that. We go 335 pages for it all to be wrapped up in one. Really, 240 of it is the journey, but, you know. So the wizard takes away the Crooked Magician's magic. He also makes the Crooked Magician not crooked, which thrills him to beyond belief. And he restores Ocho's uncle and the magician's wife to their original states. The end. He has also managed to change Bungle's pink brains into translucent ones, so she's now humble and not obnoxious. And the Patchwork Girl gets to live in Emerald City as she so chooses. The end. That's it. Literally that. Wraps up the entire thing in one chapter that is exactly 5 pages long. One of which is a color plate of the wizard. So there you go. Really wraps up. I mean, it's just abrupt, and it's, in some ways, I think it's because Baum had just sort of written himself a little into a corner, and also had probably realized this book's gone on far too long. This is in the days before Harry Potter. Even though, printing-wise, this book is almost as thick as several of the Harry Potter books. But this was just unheard of in these days. Most children's books did not go into the 300 pages. Most children's books today don't go into the 300 pages. So the ending is very, very abrupt. But really and truly, what else is there to do? Once everyone is restored and everyone is happy, what else is there? Patchwork Girl. This is my first edition, I will go back to that, that's had color. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed getting to read it with the color. Oh, here we go. Here's a picture of Bungle, all colorful. Minus, you don't see the pink brains, but that's probably a limitation more of the printing than anything. You do get one nice little moment of Neil not really paying too much attention to details. Because the start of chapter 16 is a lovely picture of Dorothy with Toto in her lap, and the description says, she wore a plain white frock without any jewels or other ornaments except an emerald green hair ribbon, for Dorothy was a simple girl and not in the least spoiled. Also, it says that Toto is curled up at her feet. Now, I come to find out that probably what Neil was thinking was, you know what, I have a vertical half page, we're just going to make this work. Coloring, from what I came to understand, illustrators didn't have all that much control over, so he may not have even had any say in that. So, there you go. This one, but it was it was really fun to have the color, because it did liven up, brighten the story up some, which I think probably also influenced why I had so much trouble putting it down. Here's the Scarecrow and Scraps. And this is a return from, in the first 2 books that Neil illustrated, his artwork was much more like this. But in Dorothy and the Wizard and Emerald City, his plates were watercolors. So it's a very different sort of brightness, and I think that sort of brings everything back and says, it's Oz, it's new, it's fresh, come on back. And it was a pretty successful book overall. It was turned into a film, a silent film, a not successful film. But the Patchwork Girl prevails. She was going to be in the Disney Rainbow Road to Oz, which never materialized, unfortunately. She shows up in a lot of newer Oz media, including the new Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz cartoon that's on Boomerang. And in fact, there are pieces, largely from here and largely from Ozma of Oz, that are taken directly from the book. I mean, Ojo the Unlucky shows up. There's a whole quest with petrification. The Woozy shows up, albeit in a very different manner, but the Woozy's still there, and he's still basically the same. So it's, it speaks to, it's a testament to the character and the way she prevails. So there you go. Patchwork Girl of Oz. Alright, so the next thing we're gonna do is TikTok of Oz. This is one I have not read. I have absolutely no idea what happens in it. I know TikTok's in it. Pretty sure that's Betsy Bobbin and Hank the Mule. And a Partridge Family trading card just fell out of it. Ask David Cassidy, how did you like school? I didn't like elementary school very much, but I enjoyed my years in high school. Joining several clubs and getting into a music group there was lots of kicks for me. No idea. Absolutely none. It literally just fell out. And this is a 1952, or so an early 50s copy. So we'll be reading that. TikTok of Oz. Next time. Which actually, if I finish this month, then I will be caught up from where I got off track. So I'm going to try and get this one finished and up this month, because this is book 8. And then, actually, the next 3 books I have not read, because after this is Scarecrow of Oz, and then Rinky-Tink in Oz. And then we have my other... So far, I guess I didn't do my ranking. So I would place Patchwork... If we take Wizard out of the rankings, Patchwork and Ozma are tied for first. Emerald City is probably third. With Emerald City and Road are third. I would put Dot Wiz as 4. Land of Oz is still 5. I still don't really care for that book. So I definitely look forward to TikTok of Oz and seeing what new adventures lie down the Yellow Brick Road for me, and I guess the Partridge Family, too. Yeah, it's the Partridge Family. Look at little tiny Danny Bonaducci. Alright, well, until next time, I'll see you. Oh, also, before I forget, if you are not a member of the International Wizard of Oz Club, www.ozclub.org, go. Join. It's $25 a year. You get the scholarly magazine that my friend Sarah will be the editor of starting next year. We're finishing out a temporary, or an interim cycle with John Fricke, who is well known as one of the big historians, especially of the MGM film. But in the next one will be my review of the new Boomerang show. So that's exciting. And yeah, so please join the Oz Club. It's $25 a year, which I do believe maybe... No, don't quote me on that. Don't get me there. But it's a great organization. You get a fun little card. You get the Bomb Bugle, which is a fantastic, absolutely fantastic magazine. Journal. It's really a journal. It's a journal. We'll call it a journal. I think that's the official title for it. In fact, here's the spring 2017. There's been a big series on the Muni staging, and even more exciting than my review is in the next one will be a review or an interview with the creator of Emerald City and what would have happened in Season 2, as well as other fun surprises, and I'm super excited to read it. Yes. So, there you go. That's my plug. Join the Oz Club. Not gonna tell you that if you join, you'll become a millionaire, but it could still happen. Who knows? So, there you go. Bye, y'all.